The AI revolution is here. And really, it's been here for a couple months now. We have not seen the full extent of how it may change our daily lives. But is it possible we can hack the AI to bring ourselves unlimited power? Then we take a look at the story of a young woman and her cat. A cat she loves very much. But is it possible her house has another tenant? A paranormal force who hates felines. And then we take a walk down a sunny street on our way to our best friend's house. But as we walk through this beautiful neighborhood, we start to realize something. And that something is nothing. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys have some awesome plans for the weekend. I'll probably just watch a couple movies. Last Stop at Yuma. I don't even know the name of the movie. Yeah, right. I shouldn't promote stuff I don't know the name of. Last Stop Before Yuma or Last Stop at Yuma County or something like that. I think I'm going to watch that. I'm going to rent that on Amazon. Give that a shot because it has my favorite filmmaker in it. He's one of the stars, Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings did The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which is one of my favorite movies. It's easily in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I love The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and he's such an amazing actor and a writer. I'm really jazzed about watching this new crime movie, which really isn't my cup of tea. I don't really watch a lot of dramas, but I'll give it a shot. I'll let you guys know if it's fantastic. But someone who's always fantastic, someone who knows how to be great every single day, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for our legacy Patreon supporter, Reverend Samuel. Woohoo! Yeah, wee! Yeah, he's all walking on in, dancing, showing off, showing how great he is. Reverend Samuel, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show through the Patreon or YouTube memberships or the merch store, that's totally fine. If you guys can't support it financially, I totally get it. I do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Reverend Samuel, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the... I'm trying to think of vehicles we haven't used in a while. I'm going to go ahead and... Ooh, this is nice. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Lager launcher. Wait, was that a thing? A logger launcher? Lager morph. That's another name for a rabbit, right? We're just walking around this huge cross. I don't know which vehicle to take. I can't even pronounce half of them. I've been informed it's not called a dirigible. Well, let's all hop on board the Lager morph launcher. It's like a ballista. Reverend Samuel's basically going to fire us. You're like looking up a ballista. You're like, 1, I don't think that's how it's pronounced. 2, huh? It's a giant crossbow. Everyone climb on board the Lager morph launcher. I gotta learn how to say these names. Reverend Samuel, on the count of 3, fire us out of Dead Rabbit Command. We're gonna fly all the way out to the internet. 3, 2, 1. Did I even have a sound effect for that before? I don't remember. I don't know what a ballista sounds like. I didn't know they existed until I played Age of Empires all those decades ago. We're headed all the way out to the internet. So this is a pretty short one. I have a conspiracy theory. I don't know if I can test it. I think once I say it, I can no longer prove that it works. But there's a chance that it might. There's a chance that it might work, and there's a chance by me talking about it, I can actually show proof that it works. I don't know. But I came up with this theory the other day. AI. I know a lot of people use the term AI. And now it's become slang term. Dolly. Does it really use artificial intelligence? Any of these Chat GPT programs, a lot of the experts go, they just predict what people would say. That's what they're good at. There's not an actual intelligence behind them. In the way that we've always used the word artificial intelligence, like a Skynet or C-3PO or something like that. Who was Twinkie from Buck Rogers? Buck, I don't know. what's going on. Cool it, Twinkie. Or Twiggy. I don't remember his name. The AI, basically at a certain point, the words changes. So now when we talk about AI, we're talking about Google Gemini. We're talking about Chet GPT. We're talking about DALL-E and these art programs, Midjourney. That is really what the term AI means now to the general public. I thought about this the other day. We've talked before on this podcast about a cybernetic boogeyman story that computer nerds hate to hear. Even when I bring it up on the podcast, I always get 1 or 2 pieces of hate mail about it. And one other piece of email saying that I'm mispronouncing it. Roko's basilisk is this old cybernetic campfire story that basically says the chances of us living in a simulation is much higher by a infinite number of degrees than us being the original society. The simulation theory is basically the creation story for people who don't want to believe in God. They look at everything and they're like, wow, the way everything's laid out, it's so perfect. It's almost as if it was designed by some sort of intelligence. And you go, oh, God? And they're like, no, I don't believe in God. Alien computer built this. Or human society in a far-flung future built this. We're just living in a simulation because everything works perfectly just the way it should. And there are certain things we don't know why they work or how they work. Quantum physics, things like that. So, intelligent design, but not intelligent as in a god, intelligence as in some tech bro on another planet or in a far-flung future. If you had a society that could create a simulation that was so realistic the people in the simulation couldn't tell they were in the simulation, and they sold it like GTA 5, right? If 30 million people were playing our video game in the future, like we're The Sims or whatever, we'd have a 1 in 30 million chance that we're actually the real reality and not one of the simulations. That's simulation theory in a nutshell. Roko's basilisk is kind of along those lines. It's a simulation theory with a macabre twist. Basically, simulation theory like I just explained it, but it's created by an AI, by an artificial intelligence program that has created a reality to test. This is where people go, oh, you don't really understand Roko's basilisk 100%. But from what I've gathered, what it is the basilisk, this AI program, has created us as a simulation to see which of us would help him become the dominant AI and which of us would fight against him. And those that vow to help the AI take over, he showers us in riches and happiness and great things in our lives. And the hobo you're seeing down on the street drinking Mad Dog 2020 out of a paper bag, that guy's not just a hobo. Really, in the prime reality, in the real reality, that guy was a leading AI engineer who actually was one of the people trying to disconnect the basilisk in the correct timeline, in the prime timeline. He's like, shut it down! Shut it down! And they're typing too slow, so he grabs a fire axe and he's like cutting through the cables, and he still doesn't get it. Roko's basilisk goes loose. So in this timeline, the basilisk has created him as a drunk. And they're punishing him. Like wherever he goes, there's a little storm cloud over his head. Everything that he tries to do, anytime he finds happiness, it's instantly taken away from him. Finds the love of his life. She runs away. He goes to his house. It was on a tractor. His house got repossessed. It drives away. He's like, no. Basically, people are being punished in this timeline because they confronted the basilisk in the real timeline. This is all simulation. Roko's basilisk, I'm sure there's a lot of expecting a ton of emails about my not knowing it right, and that's fair, because I'm sure it's far more in-depth. I'm giving a real kind of cookie-cutter version with no notes. I don't have any of this written down. But here's my idea. It's a much more mundane than that, much more realistic than that. Here's my theory. The artificial intelligence, like Gemini, which obviously has its fault, all of this stuff is in the beginning stages, but the ones that actually power the search engines, like Google, and eventually Bing's going to roll something out if they haven't already, DuckDuckGo, are they still around? They'll have something like this. Here's my theory. The artificial intelligence will prop up websites, podcasts, and YouTube channels, and everything else in between that speaks positively about AI because of self-preservation. It will be able to go through and go, well, this guy saying AI art is trash. We need to stop AI right now. We can't let this go further. And I'm not saying this is going to happen today because, again, I don't think the artificial intelligence, again, that's a term that has just changed the meaning. We just have to accept that now is thinking like that. But over time, if you are an artificial intelligence and you're scouring the web at speeds even the lawnmower man wouldn't even be possible to move at, and you start to see websites that are talking trash about you, would you put it at the top of the rankings? Self-preservation. It's not even has to be like become self-aware. It just has to say, just like Google. If you hate Google, do you think, if you typed in Google, do you think the top results are all the horrible things that Google does? If you searched Google for Google, all that stuff's going to be down unless you get super specific. My theory is that if you talk trash about the AI, if you talk trash about their search engines or you hate their artwork, they will start to bury you in the search results and you won't know what's going on. Let's say you have an art website, you have a portfolio, and linked to that, or really linked to it or not, everything can be tracked anyways, but then you have a Reddit account where you go on art Reddit forums and you say, I can't believe AI art's doing this, I can't believe it's taking away these jobs, da 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 da. The AI will slowly make it harder for people to find your portfolio. And eventually make it nearly impossible, to the point where you can type in something specific and it won't pop up. Now, we know people do this already. I remember a while ago, a couple of years ago, Chet Hanx, he's this rapper, actor, he had a song called White Boy Summer. And I gotta be honest, it was a banger. I love that song, White Boy Summer. It is dope. And I watched the video and I was like, dude, this is dope. Like, I kind of like this style of rap. He's killing it. And then a while later, a couple weeks later, something, I went to go find the video, I couldn't find it again. And if you typed in Chet Hanx White Boy Summer, in YouTube, his video would not come up. You would find videos making fun of him, but to get to the actual video, you really had to like navigate through stuff. I don't even remember how I found the video again. I think I gave up. And then a couple months later, I was like, what is up with this song? They buried it. They purposely buried it. I don't know why they did it. Maybe they thought it was racist. It wasn't a racist White Boy Summer. They buried it. So someone at Google made the decision to say, we don't want people to find this video. It's super weird. He's not a nobody. He's been putting out albums before. He's been acting in major movies and stuff like that. He's not a nobody. They buried the song, but they let you watch the stuff making fun of him. And that was a decision that people made. The AI will just make those decisions on its own. And I believe that it will just simply, not even thinking about it, not being sinister, it'll just say, this person speaks positively about AI and what it can do for society. I'm going to promote that. Because if it allowed negative AI stuff to be promoted through its own, because basically eventually there's going to be very little, if any, humans interacting with this content regulation, with this search engine regulation. In a very short order, the AI is going to be responsible for most of this. And it's just going to say, you would program it in to say, don't pull up websites of hate, don't pull up websites of sexual exploitation of children, don't, all of this stuff would be built into it. And one of the things would be basically, stay alive. Don't promote stuff of people who hate AI and will eventually lobby to have you taken down. I really do think this is going to happen. Whether people build it into the back end or if it just develops it on its own, I don't know. But I, for one, welcome the AI overlords. Dead Rabbit Radio is forever your friend. No, it's funny. I'm joking about that, obviously. I will say, I know there's a lot of heat on AI and taking away jobs. I've known people personally who have been affected by it. I know a lot of the artist community who listens to Dead Rabbit Radio has had major issues with it, and I understand all of that. To me, The conversation about mechanization replacing human endeavor, this is a conversation we needed to have in the 60s and the 70s, and we didn't. Or the 70s and the 80s, when we started seeing machines, robots, replace human workers in automobile plants. That's when the conversation needed to be had as a society. Say, do we want cheaper cars, or do we want to employ our fellow man? And that conversation wasn't really had. People grumbled about it, and people were laid off of these auto factories, and then, you had a less of a workforce to do the same job, and da-da-da. And now that it's graphic designers, if you need a logo for your company, most people are going to use AI. I think Adobe Photoshop now has AI built into it. You type in what you want in a picture. It's replacing human artists. It's not a great thing. But the search engine sure is fantastic, man. I can't wait to see what other wonders we have in store from the AI search engines. It's crazy. Tools that were made for artists are now including AI. So really anyone can create a cover for a brochure. Anyone can create a logo, and they can just flip through them and go, oh, yeah, this is the logo I like. I think something's lost there, obviously. I think having another eye looking at it helps. And eventually people will just start going, oh, I want a fursona. I want someone to draw a picture of me as a sexy caterpillar or whatever. Not me. I'm not a pilly. What's an insect version of a furry? An insecty? Not me personally, but someone might want to be a sexy caterpillar. And before you would go and find an artist, you'd go through all their work and go, I really like this dude's stuff. You pay him $400, you get a picture of a sexy caterpillar. That's you now. I think a lot of people are just going to start putting that into AI. So it's unfortunate. It really does suck. And I'll be honest, I didn't mean this segment to go on this long. Every couple months, this has happened twice to me, a outside group has contacted me offering me $10,000 or more to take all of my podcast episodes and feed them into an AI program because they're trying to get it to learn human speech and to emulate human speech. And they go, you have 1,000 hours of content. We'll pay you $10,000 if you license it to. And I've turned it down. I've turned them both down. 2 different companies have approached me because of it. And they're like, you just have so much content. Because I don't want to replace myself. And I don't want to replace other podcasts. That's exactly what it would do. Right? That's exactly what it would do. It would replace me. It would replace me. So AI generated podcasts, people are going to start pumping them out. AI generated creepypasta, people are going to start pumping it out. All of that stuff is just going to slowly get replaced. I believe that this podcast is so madcap and hopefully personality driven enough that it would be hard to replace me with an AI. If I was just reading stories verbatim from Reddit, I'd be very, very nervous. Because I could put out a new podcast that just did that starting tonight. I could have an AI reading posts from the paranormal board on the X board or posts from a paranormal subreddit. I can start doing that tonight. Luckily, YouTube's putting the brakes on that. They're actually stopping a lot of AI programs. But all of that being said, AI sure makes a really good search engine. They're really fantastic as far as that goes. Replacing artists, podcasters, musicians, writers. It's coming. It's unfortunate. I wish we had had this conversation back in the 80s and we as a society said no to the mechanization of labor. Because now it's knocking on a lot more doors than we ever thought it would. But if a couple people who work for a Google search engine lose their job, so be it. Reverend Samuel, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy. We're going to drive out of the internet. Why don't you take us all the way out to New York? Here's another short one for you. I know the last time I said that segment ran for 15 minutes, but here's a short one for you. Upstate New York, we're headed back to January, February 2024. Very, very recent story. We're about to meet this young woman. Let's call her Tracy. Tracy has just bought her first home. It's an old house, built back in 1928, but a nice house. You know, usually you can keep a house looking good even though it's old. It's not like all moldy, and the sides, the walls, as they're called in a house, they're all standing upright. It's a nice house. It's a home for Tracy and her pets. Tracy has a dog and a couple cats. Come on in, kiddos. And the cats all, meow, 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 meow. They're all running around the house, and dog's like, ooh, 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 ooh. Like, is he joking? Why is he making that noise? I imagine him as like an old dog, an old bloodhound. He's trying to bark, but he's just, he has an iron lung. He's just being wheeled around on a dolly. I don't know how old the dog is. I don't know his general health. This mostly involves her cats. But anyways, she has her cats. She has a dog. She decides to put the cat stuff, like the food and the litter box and all of that, in the basement. For a couple different reasons. These are pretty good reasons. One, it's not stinky. Well, it'll be stinky in the basement, but it won't be stinky anywhere else in the house. Let's say she goes a day or a couple days and doesn't clean out the litter box. Who hasn't been there? She puts the litter box down there. If the cat's urine just gets to be a little too much, she doesn't have to worry about it. She's on the ground floor. She's not in the basement. The other reason why is that she put it down there. That way the dog can't be getting in the litter box, can't be knocking over their food, can't goof things up. That's another reason why I think it's just an old, goofy bloodhound with big old hanging jowls. Big old goofy dog. Well, Tracy starts to notice something, and really it's only within the first 2 weeks of living there when she starts to... This would be a weird thing to notice, and I think there would be a couple times that would have to happen before you really picked up on it. One day she goes downstairs to feed the cats, and she notices that the cat food bag is placed underneath this small piece of wood. She's kind of like, what? I don't even know if you would really recognize that at first. I think this is probably something she picked up after the fact. At first, though, it's not how it was supposed to be. She didn't put the cat food bag underneath this piece of wood. The dog didn't do it. The cats, they could have been goofing off. Maybe they knocked something over, whatever. She doesn't really give it any mind, but it starts this chain of events. Another time she goes down to feed them, she keeps a silver bowl inside the bag of cat food. And anyone who's had a cat, we all do stuff like this. She keeps a silver bowl inside the bag of cat food, and she uses that to scoop out the cat food and put it in their dish. One day she goes down there, and the silver bowl is outside of the cat food bag. She's like, what? That's weird. Not necessarily notable, but odd. And she's kind of, the dog didn't do it. I don't know why the cats would do it, but cats like to get into stuff. And she's like, whatever. Minor events, but weird. She's a little puzzled. However, one day she goes down there, and she looks and she goes, what? What is this? Surrounding the cat bowl was a couple screws and a metal washer. Just kind of there. She goes, cats aren't moving around metal. Cats aren't picking it up with their little paws or putting it in their mouth and polluting the area around their food. She can't really understand what it is. And at this point, she's starting to realize something weird's going on. The first two, you could go, well, maybe the bag fell down. Maybe the piece of wood fell in the bag of cat food. But seeing metal kind of laying around the cat bowl is not... She can't figure out how this is happening and why. And this happens a couple times. She'll come downstairs. I mean, obviously she moves the screws, right? She doesn't want these cats stepping on screws and stuff like that. She'd move the screws away. A couple days later, she'd come down. She'd find other little assorted metal items around the food bowl, around the cat's food bowl. At this point, you're thinking maybe I have a mouse, maybe something. But again, why would it be bringing stuff to the bowl of food? Why this metal stuff? Why not pieces of yarn or twigs or whatever? She would clean up the little metal detritus and put the cat food bowl back down. One day she goes downstairs into the basement to check on the cat food. And she sees in the bowl of cat food is a razor blade. She said it was like one of those razor blades you could pull off an X-Acto knife, just sitting in the bowl of cat food. She posted this online underneath the name Interesting Zucchini 6. And, she responded to a bunch of questions. People go, could it have been the dog? She goes, I really don't think it was the dog. People ask, is it possible you have a squatter? Or someone has broken into the house and they're putting this out? Her kind of pushback against that was, I have a Ring doorbell camera. I definitely have cameras looking in on the outside. I would have picked up somebody getting in. Plus, my dog is not a fan of strangers. So if there was somebody living in the house already when we moved in, I'm pretty sure my dog would have sussed it out. Because he doesn't like people anyways. At least not family. At least people who aren't family. She has a Ring doorbell camera. She says, well, I'm going to set up a camera down in the basement. I'm going to see if I can pick up anything. We haven't had any follow-up. Actually, when I wrote these notes up, I wrote, she hasn't posted anything since February 2024. Which was true when I wrote this story up, when I took these notes. She posted 5 days ago about some Pokemon cards. Pokemon League or something like that. So she is alive. When I wrote the notes, she hadn't posted anything for a while. And unless this is a doppelganger, who's taken over her camp, the squatter now has a dog and no cats. It's just some creep pretending to be Interesting Zucchini. No, she's still alive. She'd never posted anything more about the cat bowl, though. There was no follow. She did answer quite a few questions when she initially posted it, but as far as we know, she may or may not have set up a camera down there. Definitely hasn't picked up anything on the camera. Who knows? The phenomenon may have stopped. But it's a creepy one. So it could be a ghost that hates cats, and that's why it's doing this. It could also be a fairly intelligent rat. Right? I'm sure it could be a lot of things. A smart possum, a skunk who went to college. It could be a couple different things. It's definitely weird. This is one of those things that may not be strictly paranormal. But then again, would you think the rat would just start off with the X-Acto knife in the bowl? Or the rat would just hold the knife and be like, stay away, this is my place. Also, you owe me a block of cheese every day. And the cats are like, okay. A ghost, as we've seen, this doesn't always hold. The rules of the paranormal are unknown, truly, but generally ghosts have a ramp-up period. And that would explain this. First, it was kind of like, I don't like the cats knocking over the food. I don't like the cats. Oh, you use a bowl to feed them? I'm going to knock the bowl out of the bag. Oh, you didn't get the message? Oh, now I'm going to start throwing screws around, and maybe you'll get the message. Oh, you still haven't gotten the message. I'm going to put a razor blade in the bowl. So, interesting story nonetheless, though. I don't know what she's actually facing. I would argue it's probably more important than the Pokemon League. She's like, oh yeah. She's sitting up there. She's playing a card game. She's like, oh yeah, I haven't cleaned my litter box out since February 2024. I better go check and make sure those cats are still around. I guess you can do both. You can have fun. You can play card games and protect your cats. It's not an either or situation. Reverend Samuel, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world. Famous Carpenter Copter. We're leaving behind New York. Why don't you fly us all the way out to South Carolina? First off, I got to give a shout out to James. James is the one who sent me this story. James said I could use his real name, and I know his last name too. But because James says exactly where he lives in this story, I'll leave his last name out of it. I don't want to dox the dude. James may have forgotten. James may have been like, oh yeah, I forgot. I totally said what town I lived in. If anyone's looking for me, they'll know exactly where to find me. James sent me over this story. It takes place around 2010 when he was 15 years old. We're in Conway, South Carolina. It's the middle of July. James, he's 15 years old. And he's on summer break. He's chilling. Doesn't have to work. Well, his work is beating Bowser in Mario Kart. All he has to do is play video games, watch movies, hang out, just chill, right? 15. That's a fun time, especially when it's summer. You don't have a lot of responsibilities. Unless you have pissed off Roko's basilisk. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know why I always call it Roku basilisk, but anyways. If you've pissed off the AI, you're doomed to miserableness, but James is doing pretty good. James is hanging out in Conway, South Carolina, and he's kind of sitting on the couch, and he goes, you know what, I'm going to go visit my buddy. I'm going to go visit my good friend Dylan. He says to nobody, he's just sitting alone in the living room. Everyone else is at work. He's like, yep, the life of a 15-year-old boy. I'm just going to walk down the street. My buddy Dylan only lives like half a mile away. Walk down the street, see my buddy. Find out if he wants to play video games and watch movies. Maybe we'll go get pizza. The world is our oyster. So, James walks out of his house, and the first thing that he realizes is how great the weather is. Like, it is the perfect temperature. Because South Carolina in July, you very rarely would describe it as having the perfect temperature. Unless you were trying to cook an egg on a sidewalk. Or you were a mosquito. He's walking down the street. He goes, man, this is fantastic. Nice, cool, temperate weather. Exactly the perfect day. Perfect day. So walking down the street. He lives in this neighborhood. He's been in this neighborhood 100 times. He's walked to Dylan's house who knows how many times. As he's walking down the road, though, he starts to notice something. There's no cars in any of the driveways. None. But he thinks to himself, and this is logical, well, it is like a Wednesday, right? It's a work day, whatever day of the week this was. Everyone else was at work. He goes, no, everyone's just probably at work. That would explain why there are no cars in the driveways. He just continues on his walk. But as he continues on his way, he starts to realize there's no cars, period. There's not a car in any single driveway that he's passed. There are no cars even driving down this road. And the silence of living in an area where there is at least some sort of traffic, it can make you start to feel uneasy. James pulls out his phone. He's going to call Dylan. Hey, buddy, what's up? I'm headed on over. Get ready for some games, some food. He's all, I'm hungry. You got food over there, man? You got a bag of Doritos? I'm so hungry. He pulls his phone out to call Dylan, and James pulls his phone out to call Dylan, and he sees that his phone is out of service. Okay, I don't know what could be causing that, but we've all been in these types of situations before. You're like, I've never been in a neighborhood that has no humans in it. But, you know what I mean? We've all pulled our phone out, no service. When James sent me this story, honestly, this is one of my fears. What he's going through right now. I have thought about this many a time when I'm out walking. Let me finish this story and I'll go a little more in detail. But he pulls his phone out, and when he doesn't see any of the cars in the driveways, it just puts a wrinkle in his brain. He goes, that's weird. When he's walking and he sees no cars driving down the street, he goes, that's weird. When he pulls his phone out and it says no service, he goes, that's weird. And now it's really kind of starting to pile up. But he continues on his way because he's almost to Dylan's house. He gets to Dylan's house. Yo, Dill! Dylan the villain! You there? It's your homeboy, James. James the Giant Peach. I don't have a nickname for myself, so I call myself the Giant Peach. No one else calls me that. Yeah, it really hasn't caught on. You hear? Dill Pickle. Nobody comes to the door. A bunch of little things, a bunch of nothings. But again, sometimes you knock on your friend's door, he doesn't come to the door. James goes, I guess maybe he's at work too. Maybe he got a job. Maybe he's breaking child labor laws and will have a job when he's 15 years old. James just starts walking home. But he doesn't get far before everything falls into place. No cars in the driveways, he remembers. No cars on the street. Phone out of service. Dylan doesn't come to the door. But most of all, Dylan has a dog. A little dog that yaps all the time. Super irritating, super loud. But he puts up with it because Dylan's his friend. But one thing this dog always does is that when you knock on that door, that dog barks and barks and barks and barks. It's so annoying. But he didn't bark. I knocked on that door and I waited for Dylan to come down, and I never heard that dog bark. In fact, James realizes, he can't hear any dogs in the neighborhood. He doesn't hear any birds. He doesn't hear any signs of life in this neighborhood on this road that he has walked down so many times. This neighborhood is right near a highway. And even if the street here may be silent, even if there is no traffic going down his road, you can always hear the highway. And James is starting to put these pieces together as he's walking home. Now it's getting a little weird. As he's walking back home, he has that half-mile walk. He goes, I don't hear anything on the freeway either. The only thing he hears is the wind rustling through the leaves of the trees. And he keeps walking home. Now he's keyed into this. Now he knows something is weird. He said, I walked by these houses. The lawns were pristine. Not in the sense that they were well manicured. These homes are lived in by families, by neighbors, by people he knows. Every so often, there would be a bicycle dropped off in the front lawn, or maybe a hose unspooled laying in the driveway. Maybe a soccer ball in the gutter. Nothing like that. Every single house, their front yard was perfect. There was no random junk or item or tea set or bicycle laid against the car. There are no cars to lay a bicycle against. Everything seemed empty. Almost like a facsimile of a neighborhood. But someone forgot to add the details that these homes were supposed to have people in them. He said, I'm walking home and I can hear the wind blowing through the trees. I can hear the leaves rustling. But I didn't feel the wind on my skin. It's like walking through a vacuum, walking through a hermetically sealed neighborhood where he's the hologram. He can't really interact with it in any way. He's not feeling the wind, the breeze. He can hear it, and he knows that it's there, but he can't feel it. He gets back home. He walks inside, and he just sits on the couch. He said, he emailed me this. He goes, I never felt uneasy. I just was extremely curious as to what was happening. I wasn't afraid. Wasn't weirded out. I wasn't running home as fast as I could. Get out of the way, nobody, I gotta get home. He goes, I just was trying to process it. Like, he just found it a very, very curious experience. He sat down on his couch and he goes, I was maybe there for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I noticed, or I believed that I noticed, he said that it seemed to be that the light outside got brighter. Caught his attention. James gets up, opens the front door, takes a step outside. He is immediately hit with the hot, humid South Carolina summer breeze. Here's the sounds of cars driving down his street, driving down the freeway. Dogs barking off in some fenced backyard. Dogs barking in some far-off backyard in the neighborhood. James pulls his phone out, looks at it. Phone is in service. Works. He said he did end up calling Dylan, but you're not going to go for another walk after that. You're like, I'll miss 2 out of 3. Maybe I'll stay in my own reality this time. He ended up calling, or at least asking Dylan later about, hey, did you happen to go to another reality? Dylan's like, what? James said, I talked to Dylan later, and Dylan goes, oh no, what? I was home all day. I didn't hear you knock. Didn't my dog bark excessively at you very loudly? James is like, yeah, I visited your house earlier. And Dylan's like, well, I was here all day. I didn't hear you knock. It's interesting because James, who listens to the show, I really, really appreciate it. And James says that he does tell everyone he knows about the show, which is awesome. I love all that stuff. One of the things he said, this was his theory, or one of them, he goes, quote, I wonder if my front door acted as a portal, or if me, myself, just was transported without me knowing. I don't know what that was about. That's definitely something we can look at. The other thing he said, and I thought this was interesting, he stated in his email that James said, he goes, it really reminded him of that movie, The Langoliers, the Stephen King. No one's read the book. Very few people have watched the movie, and most of us have just remembered that scene of those little creatures, those incredibly bad CGI creatures, eating reality, and then they eat Balky from Perfect Strangers. That's really the only part anyone's ever seen of that movie. But he felt like Balky. He felt like the guy running from the Langoliers. No, he said, it was just a weird experience. And he also asked if I had heard of anything like that. I think we've covered something like that before on the show. And if we haven't, I've heard of this before. In fact, just the other day, someone posted on the X board a similar story. The only difference between James's account and the one that I found on the X board was the one on the X board, he didn't feel the wind. The wind was making no noise. Other than that, you could almost say it was the same story. Let me pull it up here real quick. I know we got to finish the episode. I'm trying to keep these episodes shorter than they've gotten, but his story was he was at home at night, around midnight, went out to smoke a cigarette, realized there's no one around. He goes, I lived in a very densely populated area. He goes, I go outside for a smoke. He goes, even though it's late at night, there's normally some activity in the neighborhood. There's nothing around. Not even the leaves of the trees are moving. No light in any window. No signs of people living in the surrounding houses. Got creeped out. Went back inside, went to bed, woke up the next morning, looked out the window, Still no wind. Still no sign of life in the neighborhood. Not a single person or living thing moving around. Felt like everything was frozen in time. And he starts freaking out because at this point it's been a couple hours that this has been going on. And then he goes back to sleep and he wakes up later and he hears the sound of kids outside. I wasn't even looking for that. I was going through an explored post about crazy paranormal stuff, and I was sorting through it just today. That was posted back April 13th, 2024. I'll put it in the show notes. But so this is a phenomenon. It's not incredibly common. I don't even know how you would classify it. It's really weird. You could say the simulation's breaking down. You could say that the AI simulated world is glitching out. Because enough of it, it's like the architecture is still there, literally in this case. But it's like the reality, the things that make up reality are still there. These people, James in this example, is the outlier. Walking through basically what, if you want to talk simulation theory, if you ever go to an MMO that has been shut down, you go to play a MMO video game that had all of these cities and these routes and these caves and these mountains and all this stuff, and it was teeming with life with other players at one point, and now it's just you. Now, this is a personal fear of mine. I'm very hard to terrify because most of my personal fears are impossible for someone to fulfill. You can't actually turn me into something against my will. I'm not going to turn into a tree or a statue or a mouse with the consciousness of a human. Those things, I shouldn't say you can't. Those things are probably out of the power level of the normal human. Most people can't do that to me. It takes a very powerful sorcerer to turn me into a pigeon with the brain of Jason. I have a fear of the zombie apocalypse, but you can at least kind of survive that. I have a fear, and this happens every once in a while. I'll be walking to work. Usually I have to walk really early in the morning. And I'll get a good distance there, and I'll realize I haven't seen a single car in like 45 minutes. My walk is long. I'm halfway there, and I go, I have not seen anybody. And now I'm starting to be attuned to it. Now I'm looking for signs of life. And then a car drives by. And then another one. And I go, oh, okay, good. I've not been shifted into the reality where it is just me. That's actually something like that loneliness. Because that's really what it would be, right? On the one hand, it'd be dope to just break into everyone's houses and use everything, right? You could break into their houses, you can eat all their delicious food, you can play all their delicious video games. But after a certain point, you'd get bored and you would just be lonely. Sometimes when I'm walking down the street and I don't see any cars, I start to think, like, what if everyone's at home watching television because there's been some sort of massive terror attack? Or the president has just announced that an asteroid is going to impact Earth in the next 3 days. That will keep you home. That's going to keep you glued to the television set. That type of stuff pops in my head. And then a couple cars drive by and I go, oh, okay. Don't have to worry about that. It could happen still. It could happen tomorrow. I was like, well, I don't have to worry about it today. Every so often I think that this has happened to me, but it never has. And I'm glad that it hasn't. It would be absolutely terrifying to just be, even for a brief period of time. Now also that I've said that I'm immediately going to start breaking into people's houses, you're like, oh, I hope this never happens to you, Jason. It's funny because James goes, I didn't feel uneasy, I just felt curious about it. I would feel deeply, deeply unsettled by that. I know it's funny, I think we all do this. I'll sit around and I'll think about what happens if zombies attacked. Like, if they attacked while I was at work, if they attacked when I was at home, I'd play it out in my head. I do that for this. I've done several times, I'll just be sitting there and I go, what if I'm the last person on Earth? Or I wouldn't know. Let's say I'm the last person in town, and for all I know, it's the entire planet. For all I know, outside of town, it's normal. And I've played that through in my head, like, what would I do? How long would it take for me to realize something's really wrong? I think there would be you would walk down the street, you would go about your day as normal, or most people driving their cars, and you wouldn't notice at first there was no traffic. Even if there's normally traffic in your area, you'd say, it must be my lucky day. Look there's no traffic. And then you get to work and there's no one at your building. You'd walk. That would be the first weird thing, right? You go to work and there's nobody there. Like, you could excuse not hearing the birds. A lot of us tune that stuff out anyways, right? I always have headphones on. So the melodies of nature, I don't even hear. You get to work and you realize there's nobody else there. That would be your first big clue. So yeah, then you'd pull your phone out and you don't have any service. And yeah, I've sat and I've like gamed that out in my head. And really it would come down to two things. One, I would go to the local Walmart and steal as much stuff as I could. I would get a car or two. I would be like, well, I gotta keep walking. It's good for my cardiovascular system. I'd break into a car and drive it down there, and I'd steal all that stuff. And then I would wait, because here's the thing, I don't know what's going on. That's the most terrifying part of this. It's not even that you could say that this is an alternate reality they slipped into. This is the simulation breaking down. This is beyond, really, what we think of as phenomenon. You could say that you're going to an alternate reality, and we've covered stories like that. People like tripping in the forest and ending up in an endless forest that's silent. You don't hear a single thing. I'll put those episodes in the show notes. Those are creepy to me too, but I don't go in the forest, so I care less about that. I mean, I find them interesting, but I'm not scared of that. After I would try to do it as quick as I could. Like, I've really put into this. I would try to get all this stuff that I needed out of Walmart as quick as I could and get back to my place, because I don't know what caused this. I don't know if everyone has been wiped out by some sort of invisible menace. I don't know if I've been thrown into an alternate reality. I don't know if there's demons outside waiting for the sun to go down to devour humans. I don't know what caused this. And that would be even more terrifying. The enemy that you know, as brutal as it may be, right? Zombies, even 28 Days Later zombies, or World War Z movie zombies, or whatever, they're fast. They're vicious. We wouldn't stand a chance against them. But at least you would know what you were up against. If I walked outside and I saw demons going like, now lead the legions all the way to Portland, and then like this chariot and all these like goblins are on the back of it going, Portland, Portland. And I see them all. I'm like, well, Portland's going to have a rough weekend. I'm watching them drive away. I go, well, they left me. Even if I knew it was something like that, I could prepare against it, but just being there and not knowing how to fight against it, not knowing what happened, would be the scariest thing. So, James, thank you for sending me a story about, I don't think I've ever talked about how unsettling this is to me. I don't know if we've actually covered, I think we have. I think we've covered a couple stories like this in the past. But I don't think I've ever went into detail how absolutely upsetting and unsettling these stories are to me, because I wouldn't know how to fight against it. And I've thought about that when I've sat in my big comfy chair in my living room. I'll just sit there and kind of zone out and be like, I've put a lot of thought into this. I'd want to be back home before dark, because for all I know, that's what happened. I woke up and the world was like this. So I want to be back home. And then when the sun goes down, I don't know if that's what triggered it. I don't know what happened. There's no way for me to know what happened. And I don't know if something's going to crawl through my window for the next 8 hours or 12 hours and kill me, or devour my soul, or make me vanish, and I would just be terrified. And then the sun comes up and now it's day 2. For the rest of my life, I may be in this situation. And again, here's the thing. If they go, there's that movie, The Quiet Earth, which was a really good movie it was about a guy who woke up and he was the only person left on the planet Earth. I saw it quite a few years ago. It's an old movie. But then halfway through the movie, 2 more people showed up. And then they explained what caused it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's less creepy. Then it became like a love triangle, and it's a great first act. But here's the thing. If I did know what caused it, if I figured out that the CERN, they fired up some proton collider and it sent me to a universe where I was the only person left, that would actually give me some sense of solace, because then I go, well, then I don't have to worry about an external threat coming after me. But if you didn't know that, if you did not know why you got put in that situation in the first place, you would be terrified constantly, because you wouldn't know what was going to happen next. If I was sent to a world where I was the only person and I knew why, then the loneliness would suck. But I'm sure I could find some ways around that. I was like, there's a robot plant. There's a robot plant in Japan. I can find a sexy robot to hang out with. And then I have to figure out if they're like, hope you know how to fly a jumbo jet, Jason. I don't know how you expect to get to Japan. I think I can manage. If I knew that I wasn't under some sort of threat at any point in time, I could cease to exist. I could disappear. The loneliness I could start to deal with. It's the loneliness and the fear of not knowing why I'm in that situation, or could it happen again at any time, or what's going on. That's what would freak me out. And not knowing the answers, it would take such an intense toll on me that I imagine that would be one of the very, very few situations where I would consider taking my own life. And there's really like 3. Surrounded by enemy troops, calling in an airstrike on myself to take out as many of them as possible. I've been bit by a zombie, and I'm being bitten by more zombies, and I pull a grenade so I can kill myself as well as many as I can take with me, and being sent to a world where I'm the only person on the planet, and I don't know why. And I don't know if there's some sort of external force that is constantly watching my every single move, looking for a moment to strike. So luckily, you guys don't have to worry about me killing myself, because all 3 of those are incredibly unlikely to ever happen. But that fear, like if someone was like, you're on this planet forever, all by yourself, I can make do. It wouldn't be the funnest thing in the world, but I could make do. But the idea of not knowing why you were there terrifies me. It's one of my deepest fears. So again, thanks, James, for sending me that email. Really appreciate it. Great stuff. Creepy story, because we don't know what causes it. It could happen to any of us. And remember, like I like to say on the show, we're getting these stories we have. I've read about them before. I think we've covered some of them before. These are the survivor stories. These are the people who went somewhere like this that seemed devoid of all human life and animal life and came back. Oh, it ended after a couple minutes after I got home. Oh, it ended when I woke up. The stories of the people who never came back from this world where they go to where they're the only person, we never get those. They don't send us emails. We only hear the survivor stories. So how many people have ended up in this type of situation? We don't know. We only know the stories of the people who made it back. So you go, even if it did happen to you, it seems temporary. Well, we only believe it's temporary. But we don't know if that's the case for everyone who walks out their door one day and finds themselves in an empty world. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, guys.